It's just this. I'm gonna go see if I can get into the PFFP account and see how many folks are registered for it. All right. So today we have Dr. Stephen Hundley here. He's the founding executive director for the Center for Leading Improvements in Higher Education, and he's a professor of organizational leadership here. And he's going to talk about how to ace your interview. And so a few years ago, I'll give y'all the backstory real quick. A few years ago, I was sitting in on a session with Dr. Hundley, and it's where he was talking about tips for interviews. And I was like, gosh, this is really good. And so since that time, I've really wanted him to come and speak with our grad students about interviewing. And I know that right now it is a particularly hard time with the job market and the economy for interviews. So I wanted him to definitely speak to that. And I think he's a fabulous, motivating speaker, and I'm super excited to hear from him today. So thanks so much, Dr. Hundley. The floor is yours.
Well, Dr. Tabitha Hardy, thank you so much for the both the kind invitation and the nice, kind introduction as well. Thank you for all that you do for our graduate and professional school, our graduate and professional students, I should say, at IU Indianapolis and all of the other places that you make such an important impact. So, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you today. I know many of you are here with us live, and some of you will watch the recording later. Again, I'm Stephen Hundley. I'm happy to be here. My full bio and contact information, real easy. I guess I was able to snag this one. go.iu.edu/Stephen with a PH. go.iu.edu/Stephen. You can get in touch with me there and learn more about my background and ways we can be mutually supportive of each other. As Dr. Hardy mentioned, I'm a professor of organizational leadership. I've been with Indiana University, Indianapolis, and its predecessor, IUPUI, for more than 20, well, more than 25 years now. So that's a long, must have started when I was really young. So I'm fortunate to be in the Center for Leading Improvements in Higher Education and have a lot of responsibilities in that capacity. And I've also had the good fortune across my time with Indiana University to have a lot of leadership roles at the department level, at the academic unit or the school level, and across our campus. So I'm bringing that lens to the work as well. Our Center for Leading Improvements in Higher Education, people don't really know a lot about that. That's, as you all probably know from the work that you do and being affiliated with higher education, we call these research centers and institutes, and that's sort of an internal organizing structure under which a lot of things reside. So a lot of people don't know about the Center for Leading Improvements in Higher Education, but they do know about the materials that and the resources I'm sharing with you on the screen here. And that's the Assessment Institute in Indianapolis, which is the oldest and largest event in the United States focused on assessing and improving higher education. We have been hosting this through our campus, not necessarily on our campus, but through our campus since 1992. And the Assessment Institute predates us because our colleague Trudy Banta, who brought it to us when she came to IUPUI, IU Indianapolis's predecessor institution. She came to us in 1992, but it actually got started 40 years ago at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, where Trudy was a professor before she came to Indianapolis. When she came to Indianapolis, we rebranded it the Assessment Institute in Indianapolis. It really focuses on how do we go about across all of higher education, which is a very expansive sector, as you know, how do we go about assessing and improving, basically making colleges and universities better? How do we improve them for all of the constituencies and stakeholders that intersect with and benefit from the work that we do? So this conference attracts more than 1,000 people every October to the Indianapolis Marriott downtown. We have more than 300 unique educational opportunities on the program. Faculty members, administrators, staff members, student affairs educators, educational developers, instructional technologists, students, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, researchers, policymakers, all of those folks gather to really talk about higher education. So in addition to our large national conference that we have going on, and we've got these scheduled, yes, indeed, through 2030, we have a number of other affiliated resources. I'll just hit them really quickly. We have an international conference, a little smaller global gathering. We have a couple of publications. One is Assessment Update. It's a bi-monthly periodical with Wiley, and Wiley's, as you probably know, huge global publisher. We also have a book series with Routledge and the Taylor and Francis Group, so another large global publisher there on assessment and improvement in higher education. We have a podcast called Leading Improvements in Higher Education, where we're up to episode number 80 right now. It's been going on for a few years. We do about one a month that we talk to thought leaders all across the higher education ecosystem about what's going on in this sector. We also have a free webinar series offered through Zoom throughout the year. So between the podcast and the webinar series, we have about 17 to 20 hours worth of free content every year. We have a relatively new national community of practice on generative artificial intelligence that is being offered this year. So we have a national level community of practice. And then we're very fortunate to have partnerships with several national level associations and research organizations. All that to say, that's a lot to take in, and I promise this is the only commercial, the only infomercial during our time together today. But you can learn more about these and access of an abundance of plentiful free resources by going to our website. Again, that's go.iu.edu/assessment institute. Again, go.iu.edu/assessment institute. That'll take you to the Assessment Institute's homepage, and you can navigate there to all the other resources that you see on your screen here. And I'm happy to connect, even if you're not working or planning to work in higher education. Happy certainly to work with anybody to help you brainstorm ways the higher education sector can benefit from your talent as well. So I will certainly look forward to connecting with you beyond today. And again, you can find me at go.iu.edu/Stephen. That's Stephen. Go.iu.edu/Stephen. All right, so then we're into our presentation. And I always want to start with my philosophy for these kinds of presentations, because I'm with a bunch of smart people who could probably, in some cases, be giving the presentation today. So I believe that this presentation, the philosophy I'm bringing to this is threefold. It's to remind, to reflect, and to renew. I'm going to talk today about things that I think you probably already know. Some of you are probably already doing, and many of you I know are very well familiar with these concepts. But the point today is to be able to take a moment and pause and put them all back into their kind of appropriate, bring it back to the conscious level, as I like to say, bring it back to the forefront of our mind and remind us of things that we already know and we're probably already doing. I also want to reflect some of what I know to be true from the interview process. My background is in organization development and human resource development. I worked and went to school at night all the way through my bachelor's, master's, and PhD. I was on the East Coast of the United States. I have my undergraduate and master's degree at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia, and my PhD from American University in Washington, D.C. And I worked in the area of human resources and organization development. So I've been on it from the HR org development side, but I've also worked in here in higher education, where as part of my duties and responsibilities over the years, I was in charge of or involved in leading the executive search function for what was then known as IUPUI. So really anybody at a dean level or an associate vice chancellor or above, we were involved in helping to facilitate that. So I'm going to reflect some of the lessons learned I have observed and indeed have experienced being on lots of search committees and being involved in lots of interviews myself. And then hopefully a good presentation leaves us fired up and renews us. And I want to be renewed by you as well by the time we're finished. So I'm going to do my part to remind, to reflect, and renew. And I want to do so in partnership with you. How we're going to do all this, here's our overview. I'm going to ask in a minute to Dr. Hardy, ask you how you feel. I'm going to maybe put a little narrower lens to that question in a minute. We're going to reflect on how we feel. We're going to talk about framing the interview, different interview types and contexts. How do we prepare and then conduct the interview, including handling some unique interview considerations that might come our way. I'll talk about the importance of asking questions, not only today. Certainly feel free to ask questions, register them in chat. We'll reserve some time toward the end for answering your questions. But when I say asking questions here, I mean in the context of interviews. How do we go about asking questions there and following up from interviews? And hopefully one of the follow-ups is you actually are able to position to negotiate and accept or even decline offers that come your way. So that's our ambitious agenda over the next, say, 45 minutes or so. So let's start with reflecting how we feel. If you're watching us live, feel free to jot this into chat. And if you're watching the recording later, I just invite you to think about this and kind of reflect on this, these two questions here. The interview process. The interview process. That sounds like a very daunting phrase. And it is, because we're going to talk about, there's a lot that goes into it. So what excites you about the interview process? And then in what ways is the interview process maybe a bit disconcerting? So I'll give you a minute. If you're watching us live, feel free to jot something into chat. There's no right or wrong answer here. What excites you about the interview process, or maybe the prospect of engaging in the interview process if we haven't done so recently or ever. And then maybe in what ways is the interview process a bit disconcerting, a little challenging, a little troublesome, a little ambiguous, a little demystifying or mystifying. We'll try to make it demystifying. So, in what ways, what excites you? In what ways is the process a bit disconcerting? I'll pause for a minute, give you a chance if you're watching live to gather your thoughts and jot them in chat. And if you're watching the recording, just take a minute to reflect on these questions yourself. People are excited about opportunities, excited to meet others. How do you handle conversations? Is it a rejection? What about the ambiguity of the process itself? What's going on? Where am I in this? Am I making the cut? All those kind of things. Well, thank you for those of you who are sharing your thoughts in chat. Feel free to do so. There's also, am I answering questions correctly? Or am I giving them what they want to hear? And am I putting my best foot forward? Of course you are, but we're going to talk about how to maybe put the foot in a more direct forward manner that meets everybody's objectives. So continue to reflect on these questions. Those of you who are with us live, and if you're watching the recording, think about these. Keep them in the forefront of your mind as we go through our time together today. All right, let's start with framing the interview. What is the interview? Well, first and foremost, and Dr. Hardy, I'm glad you mentioned this, about the interview, being how do people feel about me? First of all, the interview is not. Let's start with what it's not. It's not a performance appraisal. It's not a judgment. And certainly, it's not a statement of our individual worth. It is a semi-structured conversation between you and somebody who has an opportunity. That's all this is. So, and let's acknowledge that interviews are kind of stacked against the people applying for the opportunity, right? Because the people who have the opportunity have all the information. And in some cases, they have all the power because they have the power to let you in to the opportunity. They certainly have all the information, at least a majority of the information. What they don't have is they don't have you. They don't have your secret sauce that you're going to bring to the interview process. So the interviews are not necessarily they aren't something we should be worrying about from a worth standpoint. We have to treat them for what they are. It's a conversation between somebody who has an opportunity and somebody who wants an opportunity. And that the people who have the opportunity often have more information and more power concerning that opportunity. What interviews are endeavoring to do, and I know you know this from the work that you've been involved in your graduate and professional studies and from your work experiences in a variety of places, interviews are designed to do mainly three things. It's meant to help understand from the person who has the opportunity. So the hiring manager, the graduate committee, if you're talking about an academic going into higher education to an advanced credential, to whatever organizational context, and we'll talk about them, wherever you go, it's meant, can you do the work that the person who has this opportunity wants you to do? Can you do the work? It's looking at competence. It's also looking at fit. And that word fit is kind of charged sometimes because it can be used in a positive and a negative way. It can also be, we can talk about person doesn't fit in here. That could be viewed as a way to keep people out who have historically been underserved, underrepresented, under-resourced. But fit often means, will the person work well here in our culture and in the context of the work being performed? And then importantly, good interviews also yield information about the trajectory of the individual person. In what ways will you, as the person seeking that opportunity, how will you grow in mutually beneficial ways? It's an exchange here that has to be mutually beneficial. Certainly for you as the individual, it has to be beneficial, but the organization or the entity providing the opportunity, they want to benefit from your career trajectory as well. They want to be benefiting from that. So there needs to be some, basically mutual benefit around the trajectory. So interviews are designed to understand the competence, the fit, and the trajectory of the people pursuing an opportunity. They also signal several things. They signal to the people who have that opportunity, the hiring authority, the manager, the supervisor, the leader, the groups of people you might work with, the upstream opportunities in the educational system where you're trying to apply for. It signals your preparation. How well did you prepare, both educationally and professionally, but also how well did you prepare for the interview itself? It signals your judgment, how you're able to operate with judgment in terms of deciding how to answer questions and how to engage in the performance that is needed for that interview. It's also you're really signaling how well do you understand and in some cases adhere to the professional norms of a given discipline, profession, context in which you're working. And finally, and I think this is one that doesn't get as much attention. We talk a lot about emotional intelligence, but you're related to that, and you all probably know this very, very well because we're trying to probably demonstrate it in our graduate studies, right? How to operate with emotional regulation. In other words, are you able to be unflappable? Are you able to be cool and calm under pressure, or do you freak out if they're asking you a question you don't know? Do you have that deer caught in the headlights look? Do you start, stammering and babbling on and getting off track? It's, in other words, how well are you able to relate to that situation, realizing that interviews are kind of a heightened reality, right? They're a little bit stressful, and in some cases they're designed to be. But it's also seeing they're looking at how well are you prepared in general and for the interview. What kind of judgment are you bringing? And how do you demonstrate professional norms that the discipline or the profession or the context might require? And how well are you able to sort of manage yourself, emotional regulation? A lot of interviews are close calls. A lot of people, sometimes when you're in the process of interviewing, and you know this, those of you who've done this before, you want to hire everybody, or at least a lot of them that come through the door, right? Because you have a lot of what I'll call embarrassment of riches, lots of great talent that exists out there. And sometimes you only have one opportunity. You think, gosh, I wish we could hire three or four of these folks, but you can't. So a lot of it, if you're in a real finalist situation, usually all three or four people who are the finalists for an opportunity, all of them are pretty darn good. And you might just hire one person. That doesn't mean the other three people are just horrible people. No, they're excellent people, but there was something that set that finalist, that person who actually got the offer, maybe something that brought the different factor that brought them, edged them out ever so slightly. So a lot of these are very close calls. It's very disconcerting and discouraging when that happens. And I'll mention here a lot of what I'll call seemingly small behaviors may add up to help make a difference. And we'll talk about what those look like as we continue our conversation. So that's about framing the interview. It's designed to do certain things. It is not meant to be your total, performance judgment for you. So let's look at the different types of interviews and the contexts in which all of this work that we're talking about takes place. Well, I mentioned upstream educational settings. So often when we talk about acing the interview, for some of us, the interview might be a graduate or professional program. It might be law school, dental school, medical school. It might be something else upstream in the higher education situation. Could also be opportunities that take place in our current programs, kind of co-requisite, if you will, or correspondingly with our opportunities here, fellowships, internships, things like that. So there might be something that happens either upstream or concurrent to our educational situation where we might be applying for an opportunity. We also know, though, that there are different kinds of opportunities that people have in the labor market, and I'll talk about one of the sectors, and that's the academic labor market, because I know some folks who are with us today or watching the recording may be pursuing their doctoral degree in the hopes of working on a college or university campus. And so the academic labor market is really broken into several types of positions and places, right? We have faculty and research positions that exist. That's in many ways continuing on in many ways the doctoral degree for a long time that was designed and crafted to be the credential that helped to populate the academic labor market. But as we're going to talk about in a second, there's a lot of what we call alt-ac, alternative academic careers that people are pursuing as well. But if you're trying to be a faculty member or research position, that's one pathway. But increasingly, there are lots of opportunities in the administrative leadership roles in colleges and universities. It takes a lot of talent in the enrollment management area, in academic affairs, in student affairs, in instructional technology and community engagement, in the business and operations of our campus, all of the different areas that were very complex organizations. So there's lots of ways that the academic labor market benefits from doctorally and master's prepared graduate students and professionals in administrative leadership positions. In some disciplines, it is not uncommon for someone to go to a postdoc experience en route to maybe a faculty or research position. So that's something we would want to think about. And then finally, I'll mention that in the United States right now, it seems to be dwindling, but we have 4,000 to 5,000 colleges and universities in the United States. So that's a lot, 4,000 to 5,000 of them. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but there's a lot of them out there. Not all of them are created equally, as you certainly can appreciate. Lots of different institutional types exist. For example, my partner Mark is the chief financial officer at a small private institution that only has 1,000 students. So they're very, very, very teaching focused versus IU Indianapolis, IU Bloomington, big, comprehensive, R1 institutions with a heavy research mission that accompany there. And then all the way in between, our community colleges, our minority serving institutions, online, for profit. So there's a variety of different places. So it's not a one size fits all when we think about the institutional type for the academic labor market. So for those of you who aren't necessarily interested in the academic labor market, or for those who are thinking about the academic labor market but want to have a backup plan, that's what that alternative academic, alt-ac as they tend to call it. There are certainly other contexts, as you know, where you can deploy your wonderful talent. They include the corporate and government environment. They include community organizations, including not-for-profits, I should say. And then there's a lot of research think tank types of organizations as well that find where great graduate prepared talent finds themselves working. So in determining where you want to work, whether it's in the academic setting, whether it's in the corporate or government or community or not-for-profit area, some things to consider. First of all, we have to get really comfortable with who we are as individuals. So we have to do some reflection up front, maybe preflection, if you want to call it that. We have to think about who are we, our identities around our personal identity, our academic identity, and our professional identity. So we have three circles here: personal, academic, professional. But these aren't circles that never intersect. What they do, though, is they intersect and overlap like a big Venn diagram quite a lot, right? So we have to look at the intersections between our personal, academic, and professional identities and who we are as individuals and what we want. What are our interests? What are our priorities? What are our needs and what are our wants? I'll give you an example between the needs and the wants. I need a job that offers health insurance. I need a job that has a retirement plan. I need a job that pays minimally XYZ salary. I want a job that offers me the opportunity to travel. I want a job that gives me the chance to work remotely 1 to 2 days a week. So I think we have to get really clear on what are our needs and then what are our wants as it concerns that. And all of this goes back to having a clear understanding of who we are personally, academically, professionally, and the intersectionality of those identities. And then get real clear on what is it that we really desire. Are we, for example, able to relocate? And if so, what is the relocation boundary, if you will? Is it in the state? Is it in the region? Is it across the country? Is it around the world? And if it's around the world, where do we have some places that are maybe more foregrounded or not? Do we have places that we would reject going to? So I think we have to just keep all of those types of things in our mind as we determine where to go. Now, there are some similarities and differences across these different contexts as it relates to the interview. Certainly, we need to be able to articulate what our motivation, our skills, and the impacts that we've made in the work that we're doing. We also, when we are making a claim, we just can't tell people about the claim. We have to back that up with evidence. So this is where we have to be able to have some evidence to back up the claims we make, not unlike what we do in our graduate and professional work in the academic arena, right? We just can't spout off something in our research paper or in our lab report or in our poster presentation or at the dissertation or thesis stage. What our committees are going to be asking, what our colleagues, what our faculty members, what our mentors are going to be saying, okay, great. Show your work. How did you arrive at that conclusion? What is don't just tell me, be able to produce, if requested, be able to produce the evidence that backs up those claims. So we're very accustomed to doing that. Also want to make sure that we're operating with professionalism, with clarity, and with a little bit of self-awareness. Where there are some differences, though, and you can certainly appreciate this, especially if we look at it through the broad lens of sort of the graduate, preparing for graduate school or the academic market, or preparing to work in the government or the corporate environment, there's some differences in how we might approach the work, and certainly differences in how interviewers and hiring officials or individuals or committees that are involved in the hiring process might look at certain things. For example, for time horizon, often with graduate schools in academic work, we're looking at a longer term time horizon for when work might be produced, when impact might be realized, versus in the corporate and government world, there might be a much more shorter return on investment where they're expecting, if you're being hired this year, they expect you to produce something where there's a return on investment that meets a very strong metric early on, versus if you're in the academic work or the graduate school environment, there might be the elbow space, if you will, to allow a little more time for your work to unfold. In the academic world as well, we love theories and models and concepts, and we love the life of the mind. So we don't mind people spending some time thinking about concepts and really stretching us. But in the corporate and government world, as great as that might be, there's much more of a press for a bias for immediate action. Okay, that's all great. You've done a lot of talking about the theory. What does that mean in terms of practical reality? So understanding that environment, the pressure to have an immediate production, moving beyond theory and getting right to practice is really going to be likely a mandate there. Of course, all these are going to vary by the broad context. I'm just giving you kind of the two big buckets here of graduate, academic, and corporate. Finally, there's a category of risk there. Most institutions of higher education, we're very fortunate to be able to work in an environment that still, knock on wood, still it acknowledges the scientific method. I think still this week we do, and so we don't mind having inquiry. We don't mind, failing and recovering with grace. We don't mind people taking a little risk. And if it doesn't work out, our entire graduate and academic infrastructure is really built on tinkering around with and figuring out whether things work or don't work. So our risk tolerance may be a little different. Often in the corporate or government environment, because of the resources and the stakeholders, and in some cases the shareholders that are involved in making investments in the work, they might be more risk adverse, and you might not be able to have the flexibility to pursue things there that you would be in a graduate or academic sort of setting. So again, all this means that context really matters in terms of how we go about planning for the interview. So now that we've framed what the interview is, now that we've talked about the different types and contexts in which the interview takes place, and I think that's good sort of background, let's get to the heart of it. You're going, my gosh, it's already half past the hour. We're just now getting to preparing for the interview. All that other stuff that was helpful to know leading into preparing for the interview. All right, so let's talk about when you prepare for the interview. This is where people really get screwed up. They don't spend time answering these questions for themselves. Really, you as the interviewee need to be able to very quickly and clearly answer these questions, and you need to practice answering them. Don't let the first time you answer these questions be at the interview. Why are you interested in this job? Why now? And why you? Or flipped around, here's why this opportunity is important for me. Here's why this opportunity is perfect for me right now. And here's what I'm bringing to this opportunity. So it's those kinds of questions. That's what you've got to be able to answer for yourself. And you've got to be able to do so this is, I know, different for a lot of us, not long prose, bullet point answers. Here's why here's why this opportunity excites me. Here's why this is a great time for me. Here's why I would make a great contribution and what my background and skill set help. So one of the things is to be real clear about why is the opportunity exciting for you? Why are you interested in doing this right now? And then what unique skill sets and backgrounds, how does your background leverage you to be successful for that opportunity at this moment in time? So getting real clear on those questions. We also have to be able to, so I think those are the starting questions for any job. And a lot of your answers may be portable across different interview opportunities. So once you get clear on some of these things, obviously the opportunity may have to be nuanced a little bit, but being clear on, what you're interested in doing, why this is the right time, and why you're interested in what you're bringing to the table. Getting clarity on those. Again, you have to adapt this for each individual interview, but I think you can carry a lot of this forward and adapt it for other interviews as well. You'll obviously want to take a look at the position in the organization that you're working in. So a lot of us, we see opportunities that come our way through various sources. We want to take a look at the duties and responsibilities of the role and really get clear on what that role requires. We also want to realize that we're going to have to, as my mom used to say, we're going to have to bloom where we are planted. We might want to work somewhere else, but this is where the job is, right? So we have to bloom where we're planted. So that job is going to take place, as you know, very, very well, within a particular organizational context. So we have to be understanding, what is that organization all about? What is their mission? What kind of priorities do they have? And often these are, sussed out by a review of their strategic plan, might be a review of their earnings report. You might want to look if it's in the corporate world, like their investor relations page. Can certainly look at the mission, vision, values of the organization, certainly different priorities. You can look at speeches or remarks that senior leaders have made to get a sense of what are the current priorities. And then what are the challenges that that organization, and even panning back, what are the challenges that that sector might be facing? So if you're working, for example, in the airline industry, right now, the cost of oil has gone up. And so they're facing with a huge price, like, okay, what about do we have overcapacity? Are we able to price our product and be able to pay for it and still have the elasticity and make a profit and very thin margin? So you have to understand what is the context of that organization, but often the industry in which they operate. To that point, we really need to be understanding the organization. Who are its customers? What audiences does it serve? What's its footprint from a market standpoint? Are they local? Are they regional? Are they national? Are they global? Where are they in that? And where are they? This is the professor of organizational leadership coming out in me. Where are they in the organizational maturation cycle? Are they a startup? Are they growing? Are they mature? Are they declining? Or are they getting ready to go out of business? Where are they in that sort of cycle as well? And then, and this is most important, something unique about them that you have researched, something about that organization that you can work in to the conversation that shows you've done your homework, that shows that you know something about that organization. So we're not only clarifying for us why the opportunity, why now, why me, we're looking at the job and the context. We're going to bloom where we're planted, and even if we're not unsure about whether or not we want to be planted there, at the interview process, we're going to convey yes, yes, yes. You have the chance to make the decision once you're offered the job. But right now, the goal of the interview is to get the job offer, and or to move to the next phase of the process, whatever that might be. So let's even if you're unsure, you want to go into it committed to it, at least for now, until you're presented with some options and some alternatives. All right. So when people ask questions, somebody said earlier, okay, they're going to ask me questions. How do I organize myself? How do I do this? We can anticipate in general a lot of the kinds of questions people might ask. How can you anticipate that? One, by looking at that job description and seeing what's in there and kind of teasing apart. So one of the things is go through the job description and highlight some of the key words of the duties and responsibilities. And I bet if you see these come up and you see some priorities around those, you can probably anticipate they're going to ask you a question about that. How do you go about answering the question? Often people babble on and on and on, and they don't know how to make it really succinct. So there's a lot of frameworks out there. One that I've used, and one but it's pretty popular, and you may have heard of this or used it yourself, is known as the STAR method, and that stands for situation, task, action, and result. And so I want you to literally think about on a in your this is old school here. Well, on a index card or something, figure out all those 10 or 12 questions in your notebook, right, Dr. Hardy? Where on your in your smart device, whatever you want to do, wherever you capture your notes there, I want you to think about what are all the types of questions that might be asked about this interview. And I want you to think about what are some examples I can pull from so I can, and I want one sentence for each of these. What was the context? Well, in my graduate program, I was asked to lead the student organization. What were you asked to do? Well, I was asked to meet with prior leaders, come up with a plan for the year, get attendance up, and have programming that was relevant. So what action steps did you take? I met with the prior leaders. I met with our chapter advisor. I did a survey to find out what people wanted, and I was able to organize guest speakers to come through and meet the need of our attendees. What actions did you yield? Well, we had an increase in the number of people who signed up for that organization, and we had a high degree of attendance. And the feedback from our evaluations signaled that we were on target in terms of what the attendees wanted and what our presenters gave. So what I've done right there is you're taking, they're going to ask you a question, and then you need to think through, you need to have an abundance of examples you can pull from, not that you've memorized verbatim, but that you're comfortable with in the background of your mind. You're not going to be able to have to pull out a bunch of, don't bring your, pull out a bunch of note cards and start flipping through them like a card deck there. You have to kind of commit these into your ethos, into your memory. But the way the STAR method happens is if you think about for each of your examples, you're going to have what was the situation, meaning the context, where did it take place? What was the task? What were you asked to do? What was the action? What did you actually do? What steps or strategies did you take? And then what was the result? What happened as a result of all that? So if you look at the bottom of your screen here, we can anticipate some questions. And these are pretty typical questions that sit on top of lots of professional and research types of jobs. Think about this. You are likely to be asked, I imagine for most of us, we're likely to be asked questions about leadership style, our teamwork ability, communication, both oral and written, projects we've managed, maybe customer service that we've offered or quality that we've provided. Have we resolved conflicts? How have we generated ideas? How have we done research and analysis? How have we set priorities? How have we dealt with ambiguity? So for each one of these right now, here's your homework right now. I mean, don't stay with me right now. This is afterwards. I want you to think about each one of those items here: leadership, teamwork, communication, project management, etc. Think about how you would answer each of these questions using that STAR framework and figuring out where in my background, where in my all of my education, all of my experience work-wise, my volunteer work, my hobbies, my interest, all of it. Where have you had experiences that you can talk about what you've done in these areas? Now, what you see at the background, at the bottom of your screen, the background and experiences there, these are sort of generic. Now, you want to take these generic ones and overlay it, intersect it with what's in that job description for the very specific things that they're going to be talking to you about. And I promise you, if you spend some time, you got to commit to it. Think about us. You got a 4-sentence answer. Four, one, two, three, four, 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 4-sentence answer: situation, task, action, result. And try to organize your thoughts around what you see at the bottom of your screen, coupled with what will be in that job description or that position profile or that advertisement that's we're talking about that opportunity, and be able to just sort of commit them to yourself and frankly practice them so that they come off not sounding robotic. And you don't want to, you're not trying to memorize it in such a way that you're going to go off script, but you want to kind of commit to this and make it part and parcel to who you are. Okay, so we prepared for the interview by reviewing the organization, by reviewing the job, by thinking ahead about what we think they might ask for us. Now we're at the moment where we're going to actually have the interview. We're conducting the interview. This, of course, I sound like a parent here, right? Make sure you make a good first impression. And you'd be surprised, that means being punctual. I grew up in a very strict military family, and my father, who's a retired career Marine Corps officer, used to say if you're 15 minutes early, if you're 10 minutes early, you're 5 minutes too late, meaning be there 15 minutes ahead of time. So be punctual. That means it might mean getting there early and figuring out where to go. Might mean maybe doing a dry run of driving to the place the day before or driving to it in the traffic in the morning like it would be on rush hour. Be punctual, dress for success. And they always say dress for the job the next job up, the one above it, or at the very least understand the context. If you know, for example, that nobody wears a tie at the organization, you may not want to wear a tie to the interview. But I'm always a big believer to be a little more conservative and a little more strategic in how you dress. And people, because people know you're trying to make a good impression at the interview. And then importantly, and it's hard to do because we're all nervous, be ourselves. We have to be our authentic self. And that's tough because we're a little nervous. But the goal is they want to know who they're getting, and you want to let them know who you are and be your authentic self, even though you're a little nervous. So how do we answer those questions? I'll tell you, I always call it strivers versus doers. Strivers versus doers. In sitting in a lot of executive searches at our campus and elsewhere, people who already occupy the job somewhere else and are applying for the same job here are doers. People who are the assistant this, the associate that, and want to be that, they're the strivers. And almost to a person, the strivers try too hard. And the doers are just here. Here's what it is. Strivers tend to over-explain. They tend to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and they tend to take the least little thing they've done and try to make it bigger than it is. Don't be that. Even though you're striving for it, here are some ways we can answer interview questions effectively. First of all, answer the question that is being asked. And if it means taking some notes and saying, okay, because sometimes interviews, especially if you're working with a big interview committee, they might ask you like a 3-part question, and they'll give you this long paragraph of a question. Sometimes it's hard to keep all that straight. It is okay at this level of life. It is okay to take a little notes and say, give me a second, I'm gonna take down. Would you mind repeating that? Take some notes, it's okay. And then look at what are they asking? What are they asking? When it's time to answer the question. First of all, remember that STAR method: situation, task, action, result. But if that, you can't really organize yourself quite there, I would encourage you to think about what are they asking, and then make sure at the very least you get that result in there. You get the punchline, you get the conclusion in there, and being able to back it up with evidence. Reason I say this is so different than how many of us were trained in the academic arena. Think about this. In the academic world, we are taught, oh, well, here is this need, and this need accompanies a problem. And let me tell you what we know about that problem. And let me tell you what we've done about that problem. And here's what's happened with that problem. Here's what we've done. And then we did this, and then we did that. And finally, boom, here's what happened. They've stopped listening. So you need to start with, instead of saying, I'll give you an example. Well, I was working in the lab, and the principal investigator went on vacation, and they needed somebody to organize the people working there. So I volunteered to do it. And then I took notes, and I did the timesheets, and I helped with the budget, and I cleaned up, and I made sure. And as a result of that, when the person got back, they thought, oh, wow, this is really good. It didn't fall apart. So I was able to be the supervisor. And then I was able to be doing HR and finance and working with everybody. And over time, I got to grow into really being a leader in the lab. Oh my gosh, shoot me now. That's the striver talking. The doer, I was able to lead a lab. And in doing so, I was able to manage people, manage resources, manage budgets, and make a difference. How I got there was very quickly. I was able to prove myself on an interim basis, grow my skill set over time, and get the trust of my boss and my colleagues. That's a different answer than prattling on and on and on, getting to the point. And a lot of us are tempted, and I'm tempted to do it as well. Some of you are saying you're doing it right now. Um, Over explain. We keep talking and talking and talking until we try to land on a point. This is where that preparation helps. Think about the STAR method. Think about all those anticipatory questions. Don't try to over explain. Bring it in and make sure at the very least know what you've got to convey. Know what that punchline, know what that conclusion, know what that result is, be able to back it up with evidence. Start there. And I would say that's a tip for not only the interview, that's also when you're working with leaders, senior leaders in particular. Start with the punchline. We need $50,000 for this initiative. Okay. Boom, then shut up. You got your $50,000. Move on, or 5,000, whatever. Yeah, don't keep over explaining it, because most of the time people can pick it up pretty quickly there. You also need to, like I'm doing here, keep an eye on time so that if you're not able to get to something at a current answer, most of us are tempted to want to say everything there is about it. Know that you might have a chance later, and if you don't get to it, that's okay. But the point is, you have to prioritize your answer in what you're trying to convey, and that's why when you're asked a question, know what is it about that question, and in your answer that you must convey. And usually I say punchline. That's the result. That's the key point you want them to know about. Make sure that is there, and often start with that, and then build the rest of your narrative around that. So some tough questions that are often asked are, tell me about your time you failed, or tell me about your weakness. Why are there gaps on your resume or CV? Why should we choose you over other? I hate this third one. People ask it sometimes because you don't know. You want to say, well, I don't know. I haven't seen the entire candidate pool, so tell me what they are like. So you can't say that to the person, because that's kind of a bad question that they ask you. But here are ways you can do that. You tell me about a failure. I would think about, you're probably going to be asked, tell me about your weaknesses, or tell me about something that failed. That's going to likely be asked. So spend some time in your prep work thinking about that. Was there a group project and we all been there, right? Where we had some social loafers in the group that didn't pull their weight. Then you miraculously, fell on the sword and saved the day. So that's, there's two ways of looking at that. Great, great, you did it, or you were a big patsy there. So how you have to frame that a little bit, right? So you need to think about when did you fail, but importantly, what did you learn from the failure? And so you want to be able to frame it in a way that even though there was a misstep there, and I wouldn't even use the word failure. I would use misstep. I would use lesson learned. I'd use something like that. I wouldn't co-opt the interviewer's language. Make sure that they know that what you've learned from that, and how you're going to avoid or a similar mistake, or how you're going to adapt from that going forward. If there's a gap in your background, or you don't have something, acknowledge it truthfully. You don't have to say something personal if you were going through a divorce, or had a health issue, or had some serious thing. You don't have to do that. Frankly, these days with our very mobile and dynamic economy, that's less of an issue now than it had been in the past. I think you just have to say you've got perfectly the great excuse here. I've been investing in myself in my graduate and professional education, and kind of revisit that. And then, of course, if they're asking you why we should hire you, you don't know what the other candidate pool looks like. You don't know the rest of that. So this is a chance just to reemphasize, why the opportunity, why now, why you. Again, take every opportunity to get that back, realizing it's okay to have some intentional repetition in your answers to underscore or to build some threads in the tapestry. All right, really quickly, I want to talk about handling some unique considerations, and I'll reserve some time at the toward the top of the hour to answer some of your questions. In academic settings, you might be asked to give a job talk, a teaching demonstration, and certainly meeting with people. You're going to be doing that. So if you're doing a job talk, what a lot of us are not good at doing is dumbing it down for people, And I say that taking the specialized work and making it for a generalist audience. That's something that a lot of graduate students, certainly a lot of PhD students, don't have a good opportunity of doing because they don't often, we're so talking to ourselves. We're talking to each other, our peers and our mentors. So what I encourage you here is to be able to tell it to an interested party who's not a specialist. So try this out with friends and family, who aren't in your area. And you do this. You have times you do this all the time. And they start glossing over and glazing over, you've lost them. So be able to say, here's what I do, here's why it's important, and here's how I can help you. And be able to answer that in 3 sentences. Here's what I do, here's why it's important, and here's how I can help you. And be able to make sure that's part of it. Now, your job talk might be a little longer than that. It might be in a half hour, an hour or so. So you can go a little deeper, but just be mindful that most, if not all of the people in the audience will be interested, but they're not going to be specialists. So bring them along with you. Bring them along. Do what I did at the very outset. Say, I'm going to remind you, I'm going to reflect, and let them know that some of you in the audience may know a lot of this. Others of you may not. Let's come along together and I'm going to highlight it for you. Do that so that you can make a good impression. If you're asked to do a teaching demonstration, obviously you got to pick the content that's, probably less is more. So something narrow content-wise. Remember, if they're asking you to do a teaching demonstration, they also know, how do you understand pedagogy? How do you know how to demonstrate your ability to engage an audience, work with students, work with people? So you may want to consult the Center for Teaching and Learning, the Preparing Future Faculty program. Obviously, all these resources are there to help you do that. So when you're asked to do a teaching demonstration, it's not just content, they're also looking at process. And then if you're meeting with people, and sometimes these academic jobs, you end up meeting with lots of different groups of people. Everybody's important. So don't think, oh, these are just students, or oh, worst case, that's just the secretary or the administrative assistant or the receptionist or the greeter. No. Often people will go back to the person. We always go to the people and say, hey, how were you treated today? The person escorting people around our campus, how were you treated? The person never once asked me a question or acknowledged my presence. Oh, we're not going to hire that person. Versus, oh, they were quite pleasant. We struck up conversations all day long. It was very nice. They were very warm and friendly. That's the kind of person. It's how they behave to the people. Ethics is obedience to the unenforceable. In this case here, it's obedience to the people who may not be in a decision-making role, but who can, in fact, that's that small behavior that will make a lot of difference. Treating the people who are your meeting that you may not realize they may have more of an input into it than you might recognize. So treating everybody with dignity, with respect, with professionalism. A lot of us are going to be asked behavioral questions or maybe part of a larger panel interview. If you're asked behavioral questions, and this is true in some cases of academic jobs, certainly government jobs, where you might have a set of very standard questions that are asked, expect that everybody's going to be asked. They might read you the question because they're implored to do that, to be able to read it. Just know that there might be some standardized questions. Remember how to organize your STAR, situation, task, action, result. And then if you're in a group where it's a committee or a large panel interview, usually somebody on that group, if there's 8 or 10 of them, they've each been assigned a question to ask. But recognize that just because Dr. Hardy is asking me this question, I shouldn't just look at her the entire time I'm answering that question and realize there's an entire other group of people there. So even though the person has been assigned to ask you that question, answer it for everybody and try to give context to everybody, eye contact. So I want to be mindful of virtual interviews. We're doing one where in some cases, this is exhibit A right here. Figure out what does that look like? What your camera, your lighting, all your background stuff. Be aware of your movement, recognizing that I'm a big gesture person. When I'm talking in the classroom, my colleague Patrick is here. He knows this. very big gestures, which are fine. But here, I can't go out of frame too much, right? I've got to be mindful of where the frame is. I've got to be mindful that there might be multiple people there. There might be people that have, as we have today, people with their cameras off that might be distracted doing things. So you just have to be aware of all of that. And I would be mindful that if you're a lot of what a lot of people do in the Zoom environment or the Teams environment, they will have notes pasted all around. And it's pretty obvious where people are looking at their note. Oh, you've asked me the question about teamwork. Oh. Well, this one time when I was working at the fast food restaurant, you can tell people are looking at their notes. So just be aware that, especially in Zoom or on the virtual environment, which is increasingly, what people start with often, you just be mindful that people can see your eyes and they can see what's going on, and just be aware of that. So helpful probably to practice. And I would also mention, especially if you're dealing with multiple people in that environment, just be sure to pause in between so people can mute and unmute, and people can gather, they can find you, on the screen when you're talking. It may even help just to, raise your hand a little bit there. All right, I'm going to conclude with asking questions and then demonstrate that by taking some of yours. Good questions signal that you've been engaged, that you're thoughtful, and importantly, that you are respectful. So often good questions that you as the interviewee can ask of the people for the opportunity. Tell me about what would, if we're fast forwarding a year from now and I've done a great job, what have I done? What are some key success factors? What are some metrics? What are you looking for in it? And if they can't answer that, don't, give them a little bit of grace, because they may not, they may not know themselves. So, give them a little bit of elbow space there. Don't put them on the spot too much. It's important to ask, especially if you've got a group interview, but you ask people, tell me about the culture here. Why do you like working here? Ask that of the people there. And that sometimes how they answer that might give you some insights into what it's really like working there. What are the opportunities for professional growth? What types of questions to typically avoid? And you know this, don't just say, well, really, what's your biggest selling product? What's your mission? How many locations do you have? That stuff, most of that stuff's retrievable publicly or on the website. Just avoid asking yes or no questions. Does this job have training opportunities? Yes. Well, okay. Boring. Yeah. Probe a little deeper, make that a little richer. And then often compensation details are usually best handled for later in the process and not really at the early stage of that. But that's typically the norm. Although there are some pay transparency laws that are in effect throughout some areas of our country, that you might want to just know. But I would make the classic line is make them fall in love with you first, and then talk about the compensation after they've fallen in love with you. So often, what differentiates another small behavior that can be helpful is thank you communications, doing it timely. If you're going to do it, be specific, and especially if you're writing to multiple people, make each one of them. I know it's tempting to want to just make it the same, but people do compare notes. Make each one of them slightly different so that you can talk about if you've met 4 people that day, make each one of them ever so slightly different and customized, unique to that person. And then again, reinforce why you are good. I think, a 3-paragraph, thank you for meeting with me. I enjoyed our conversation about blah, blah, blah. I'm looking forward to this opportunity, and here's why. Boom, you're done. Thank you. I enjoyed this that we talked about. Hire me for this reason. You're done. So a 3-paragraph, 3-sentence kind of thank you letter, thank you note, email. Doesn't have to be long. You're just doing that. And the process is the product here. Just by the fact that you've done this, that's going to help. Finally, when you conclude everything, you want to make sure you reflect on it, regardless of outcome. What did you do that worked well? What were some opportunities? Maybe debrief it with a friend or colleague or supporter. Incorporate their feedback and your reflections into the future. And of course, we don't have time, it's beyond our scope today, but be ready to, when you're granted that offer, either figure out ways to negotiate, ways to accept, or ways to decline. All right, we've covered a lot in the last 45 to 50 minutes. We talked about how we feel about the interview process. You shared with that. We've framed the interview. We've talked about different types of and contexts for interviews, how to prepare the interview, how to conduct the interview, how to handle unique considerations, including asking questions, and importantly, what are some follow-ups, both in the thank you department, but also in the reflection and improvement department as well. We've come to a point now in our remaining couple minutes where if you've got questions or comments, I'm happy to entertain them. I might ask Dr. Hardy, Tabitha, if you could help me maybe moderate some of these just so I can make sure I'm not missing anything there.
Absolutely. We have 2 that are in the chat. One says, how much time is it to be taken for an interview question response? Smiling, facial expressions, as more of first round interviews since they are virtual?
Sure. Great question. First of all, if a good interviewer will tell you we have in the 30 minutes and in the 60 minutes, we have 8 questions for you. And if they don't tell you that, it's fair to say, I want to be mindful and good stewards of everyone's time. Approximately how many questions do you have overall? So I can judge my cadence of my response. So for example, if they tell you in a 60-minute interview, we have 10 questions and we want to allow time for you at the end, then you've got about 5 minutes or less per question because 10 times 5 is 50, and you want to allow that 10 minutes. So that's where preparing your talking points in advance, knowing that situation, task, action, result, knowing those generic questions they might ask, anticipating those generic and those specific questions, knowing that so that you can be efficient in your use. Less is more in the answers to those questions. That's why it's helpful to maybe take some notes about them, listen to what the question really was. And then if they haven't told you how many questions are, I think it's a very appropriate at a professional level here to say, I want to be good stewards of time. I want to make sure I answer comprehensively but succinctly. Approximately how many questions do you think will be in our time together? If they don't tell you, savvy interviewers hopefully will tell you that ahead of time. And just be mindful of you're always on. You're always being seen, even though everybody in the room, if it's a multi-person interview, even though they're not all going to look at you all the time, somebody's looking at you all the time, and just be mindful you're kind of auditioning for a part there, and that's in some ways that's kind of what it is. What else do we have? What other questions? Let's see one about
Yeah.
AI. Yeah,
So, yes, can you say more about getting past the AI scans, or if we find ourselves faced with an AI person during an interview? I
sure.
actually used to have a student
It,
that had a
it,
20-minute interview that was online, and basically they were recording their answers.
Sure. So part of that is I think you just have to treat the AI agent similarly to a human agent, although you've got to, if you think that that is the case, and sometimes there's a level of disclosure that ethically people should let you know that, but they may not. Treat everybody, you treat that AI agent with, treat the AI agent with dignity and respect and professionalism as well. And just be mindful that the AI agent may be, it may be a little clunky and there might be miscues and misinterpretations, and you might have to clarify or repeat, ask them questions back to make sure you're targeting the right nature of your response. I mean, in terms of trying to get past AI prompts, this has been a thing for a long time with applicant tracking systems and others for years and years and years. Part of it is your resume, your CV, your cover letter, whatever you display needs to be accurate. But I would recommend this is true for both the cover letter, but also for the interview prep itself. Go back to that job description, really look at those keywords and make sure that you are using some of their language in your cover letter and in your resume and your CV. So that might mean, of course, obviously customizing material for each opportunity, taking a look at whatever you can and excerpting out as many of the keywords and the priorities that position and that organization have, and make sure they find their way as accurately and honestly a representation as you can into the material that you are presenting. And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg as it relates to AI. So I'm looking forward to hearing some of your experiences with this as well. I know we're right at time, so I'll end with, again, please keep in touch with me. You can go to go.iu.edu/Stephen to get in touch with me, and I would love to connect with you and hear about all the great successes you're going to have. Do we have time for maybe one final question or comment?
Sure. Also, please complete the evaluation so we can have more fantastic discussions like this one. Is there one last burning question? You can unmute or put it in the chat. Some thank yous coming through. Y'all, he gave you a lot to think about, didn't he? All right, I don't think we have another burning question, but if so, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Hundley. Thank you guys for attending. And thank you, Dr. Hundley, for having us and spending this time with us. We really appreciate that.
Thank you as well. I have enjoyed my time, and I look forward to hearing about all the great interviews and, importantly, all the great offers that everyone's going to get. So please do stay in touch.
Thanks,
Thank you so
y'all.
much.
Good day, everybody.
Thank you.